Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday. One of the biggest misconceptions in property investing is that successful investors are naturally confident. We look at experienced developers, portfolio landlords, or people speaking on stage and assume they've always had that confidence. But the reality is very different. If you speak to almost any successful investor, they usually tell you about the sleepless nights before their first purchase, the nerves before making that first offer, or the uncertainty they felt taking on their first refurbishment project. So this is part 2 of our mini-series around the 3 C's of property investing. So hopefully you've listened to the first one in the series around the clarity, and then this episode is all about confidence. So Mark, over to you. What's your thoughts around confidence and what does that mean to you within this setting?
Yeah, I think confidence is interesting and you meet people who appear to be naturally confident. I think the key there is this setting. So you'll find that some people are confident in certain environments, but not necessarily confident in others. So somebody who's confident in their job, let's say they're senior in their role and what have you, put them in a different environment, totally different sort of personality, lacking the confidence and so on and so forth. So, and you get the whole imposter syndrome and whatever that comes with it as well. So yeah, it's interesting. We talk about things such as your identity to help you build that confidence. Confidence isn't something you have, it's something you build and earn over time, often through small little wins. So rather than trying to do the big thing, which may scare the living daylights out of you, then taking the incremental steps to build confidence and win those various different steps. So I think that's really interesting. The thing with it as well is confidence is not motivation. Motivation is something very, very different. And motivation fades pretty fast. So if you are relying on motivation to get you through it, and when you first start, it's exciting. You get all the deals, you want to run the numbers, you've got fantastic spreadsheets to do weird and wonderful things. You analyze the hell out of everything and yeah, you're motivated. Then you realize you're not getting any rewards or paybacks or anything like that. And it's the staleness starts to come in and so on and so forth. Then your confidence takes a knock because, I'm not going to be able to do this and so on. So once motivation starts to wane, that's where discipline kicks in. So keeping discipline to do the daily jobs or the weekly tasks that you've set yourself, which are small incremental steps. If you've listened to the Clarity episode, you'll know that we talk about the route that you go in, the path you're following and the steps you need to follow to get there. And then the discipline comes in and takes over from that. So the analogy everyone can relate to is the gym analogy, right? So you've decided on January 1st that, you're not drinking for the whole of January. You're going to hit the gym. You're going to get yourself in shape. Bang, you're at it for 2 weeks. You're up, your gym kit's on and what have you. Then something gets in the way from a work. I'll give today a miss. And then that starts to creep in. You start to give yourself the excuse. The motivation starts to wane. You realize it's not as easy as you thought it was. And then the discipline needs to start to take over to get up and do that. Now, there are things you can do as well in your day-to-day life to take away the barriers to keep that discipline and to keep it as easy as possible. So I do think that, over time, small incremental goals and wins will help you build the confidence so that you can gradually get into the space as well. So, that's where I think confidence looks like.
Yeah, and I think if you just keeping on that gym analogy, if you maintain going for the whole of January, you'll then start, what was nervous and nerve-wracking and you're looking at it for excuses. If you go for the whole of January, all of a sudden that place isn't a strange place anymore. You know your way around the gym. You know how to use the different machines. You've probably recognized a couple of people and people have started saying hello to you or whatever. And now you're more confident in that environment. And then, if you stick to it, that confidence will only strengthen, and you'll keep building that resilience. And yeah, that's a super important piece of this, because anyone can go to a PIN meeting or a property network investor meeting or some training or anything and get motivated quite quickly by success stories and the theory, the get rich quick, kind of model and things. And not that you can't make a lot of money, but it isn't necessarily that quick. So just be mindful of that. And then all of this is around, for me, I'm quite big on self-belief. One of my favorite quotes is attributed to Henry Ford, which is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. And that's definitely, the mindset, same, glass half full versus glass half empty. If you think you can do this, then you can, but if you, and the contrary as well. So part of that is being around people that have been there, done it. And that's why the networking piece is good, because you can talk to people and they'll say, oh, I've done this, I've done that. And then that helps you, give you the confidence, because it's fine when you've got people on stage, presenting, they're obviously further down the line. But when you're sitting next to someone at an event who was a school teacher or a police officer or something, and they've built a small portfolio on the side, on the days off or in the evenings and the weekends, and they've bought 3 or 4 properties, and now they're looking to kind of ramp that up. Then go, oh, right, okay, they can do it, I can do it as well. And that's where that confidence comes from. And if you've got the clarity from if you've got the clarity from last episode and you really spent the time on being clear on what those goals are, one of the things, especially when you're trying to get your first deal, and I've said this a number of times, and I've also been there, is to not be a motivated buyer. One of the big things in property investing is, trying to find the good deals come from motivated sellers. People have got a reason that they need to sell quickly, whether it's through bad debt or divorce, or obviously if someone's passed away or something like that. Then, but you can also be a motivated buyer. And, we'll have seen this at auctions and things where you've got people who are just desperate to do their first deal, and they just keep bidding because they want to do a deal, and they're desperate to do a deal, more so than being strict and clear on what their goals and their strategy is. And therefore they end up buying something that they shouldn't have bought. And so if you go back, that's why all of these, the 3 C's are intertwined, and they all feed into each other. So if you're clear on what you're trying to achieve, it'll give you more confidence on what you're bidding on and the types of properties that you're buying and how much you're prepared to pay for those properties. It gives you inherent focus.
Yeah, the other thing, so we spoke about confidence, motivation, discipline, and realizing that this is not a 2-week exercise. This is probably a commitment for a number of years. So therefore, this whole delayed gratification piece is very much a thing. You won't get the rewards on day one. And it's the compound effect of little actions that will get you to where you want to be. And it's in 5 years' time that you'll look back on the journey you've been on. If you've stayed consistent with it, if you think of the person you will become in 5 years by staying consistent and the confidence you'll have, arguably you'll never truly feel 100% confident of everything, because you'll get to a stage in the process where your single lets are, they're a breeze. I don't really have to think about them. I can quickly work them out on the top line numbers and bang, that's done, whether it's a deal or not. Now I'm in my conversion to 21 flats or whatever. That's different. You need to rebuild confidence in that. So you'll always be on this journey of learning, unless you get to your destination, which is I want X, Y, Z. But invariably, that process just never really stops when you get in it, because you've got to manage, maintain, regulations change, or, we're in that type of environment. So I think that's something to be aware of, is you will not get the rewards on day one, hence not trying to be a motivated buyer, not running straight to auction to get your first deal done. Be patient, be consistent, and that over time will build confidence, although it may not feel like it at the time, because you want to get on with it, obviously.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges that we have when we speak to people, especially where they're particularly new to investing and property, and they'll come and say, "Oh, how much can I get? I want to get something," and you can just tell that they lack the fundamental knowledge And again, this is one of the, we've talked about this. One of the reasons that we've started this podcast is because we want to try and share some of our knowledge and experience with newer investors, because we sometimes will say, look, yes, you're keen. Yes, you've got the funds to do a deal, but you do lack some of the knowledge. So our first piece of advice is go away, read some books, watch some YouTube videos, listen to some podcasts, speak to some investors, go to networking events, do all of those things first before you rush to make your first deal. And again, go back and be clear on what you want, because the more knowledge you get, that will give you more confidence that you're doing the right thing. We believe that property investing is a great tool, even though there's lots obviously going on to the negative in the news and things. But there are other investment classes as well, and stocks and shares and crypto and all of the other stuff. Maybe property isn't for you, because you need to decide the time and effort and energy. And once, like you said, it's like the dog is for life, not just for Christmas type thing, isn't it? It's similar with property. If you make a decision to invest in property, you have to be wholeheartedly all in, because it does take commitment. It does take some very levels of stress. It takes a lot of admin, which is a lot of people are not particularly quite aware of the admin involved. So there's a lot of things that you need to be aware of. And the more people you speak to, and if you're comfortable with that, then you can get comfortable with buying into it long term, delayed gratification, and getting those rewards in the longer term. But the knowledge piece for me is understanding all of the moving parts.
To rewind a fraction in terms of the eagerness to do things, and we see this a lot in transactions, it's really hard actually to try and navigate with the client because they've done their analysis. And I'm talking specifically to buy, refurbish, refinance. So you're going to buy a property, you're going to refurbish it, and you're going to refinance into something. It's really tough then when you've got somebody who's got 4 exit strategies, because you just don't know. And that, to me, speaks to the lack of clarity as to what you're trying to achieve. Now, I understand you need a plan A, B, C, and D if you're going to commit your money. That makes absolute perfect sense. But the strategies are usually wide varying. So, I'm going to exit this. We can either do a HMO, a service accommodation, or I can let it to a housing association, or it could be a single let. And I'm like, right, okay, whoa, stop. What exactly are we doing here? You need to pick one. I understand there's an alternative, but which is the one that you're actually going to pursue? If that doesn't quite work, then yes, it will default down to the next, and so on and so forth. What that, as I say, speaks to is that absence of real clarity as to what you're going to do with that project and what the outcome you're trying to achieve. What people are thinking of is, how am I going to make sure this doesn't fail? Now, that's a very different thought process. That's probably one that lacks a bit of confidence, because if you know what you're doing, you'll just go, right, well, I'm going to whack this straight into HMO because that's the only thing that makes sense in this area. And look, if that really doesn't work in 18 months, I can always default it back to this. That, for me, is somebody who has confidence rather than just a list of different strategies to get them out of the bridging loan they might have to commit to.
Yeah, agree. And within the whole, what you're talking about there is the, knowledge around the exit. And that's the strategy and the use class. If we go back into the BRR, it's understanding, what are the legal aspects around it and the legal process. There's understanding the finance aspect and the finance process and what that looks like. There's the valuation process and what that looks like. There's the build element or the refurb element, which is, understanding is planning needed, is building control needed, are there any warranties and sign-offs and consultancy agreement, all of these various things. So there's so many different aspects. So sometimes if you've got no experience in any of them, then you have got some work to do, really. And that's not to put people off. We do that to try and protect them from getting into the deals that either don't make sense or that they don't know what they're doing and get burnt.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that leads us quite nicely into the whole knowledge piece. On that front, do you want to just run through the whole through the knowledge and how that we touched upon it a bit, but we can go into it specifically?
For me, it's around all of those aspects of. That's why we push people back and say, look, do you understand how this works? Do you understand how that works? Right? Do you know how valuations work, for instance? No. okay, we can give you a quick understanding, but you need to do a deep dive. And we've done a number of episodes around different valuation types and how they work, different types of finance, different types of strategies. And this is obviously all within just the finance piece. We've tried to do some on the legal side of things. We've tried to do some, obviously we've done a few on the valuations. We tried to do some on rates and what they look like, and lenders' appetite and the way lenders think about things. But there's also, like I said, lots of other aspects around the building and the deal analysis and things. We do have some calculators on our website as well, which people can use to go in and kind of assess deals based on the numbers that they have. And so if you've done the clarity piece up front, and then you find a deal and then you run it through the calculator and it spits out some numbers, then you'll be able to decide whether that works for you or not. So, there's plenty in there to know. And I would always encourage people to take a bit more time to get the strategy and right up front. And then, because the more you use the calculators, that will throw up some questions. And then the more videos and books you read, that'll throw up some other questions. And then as all of that builds your own knowledge bank, and eventually then you'll get to the point where you go, right, I'm ready to go now. So that's for me around really understanding the various aspects of it.
Yeah, I think knowledge is an interesting one. So I don't know if you've heard of it, called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So we speak about this all the time, which is you've got some people who study and be in education courses for the next 3 years and never do a deal. They know it inside out, totally know probably more than us, by the amount of education they've gone and all the different strategies and the theory of it. And then you've got the person who rocks up and just buys one without even thinking about it. And then they go on to build a £3 million, £5 million portfolio because they just got on with it. So I think there is very much a balance here around learning and understanding. Absolutely. It's about risk management, isn't it? So the more you know, theoretically, the more confident you become. However, the more you know, the more risks you can see. And therefore, they become fear and barriers as to, I'm not going to do that because if that doesn't go right, I'm going to do this. Whereas the person who just jumped in 2 feet, rightly or wrongly, is now in it and has just got to figure it out either way. And we'll learn on the job. And I think there is clearly a balance between the two around it. So just be careful that you don't stay in that knowledge cycle and then never actually ever do anything. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but at some point you've got to jump, haven't you?
Yeah, you have, and I totally agree. You've got your course junkies, so there's a label there for the people who just do courses and don't do any deals. There's a bit of a running joke within, some property investing circles. And then you've got the analysis paralysis, haven't you? Where you've just got people who just, like you said, just all looking at heads in a spreadsheet and will just find everything to go from it. But I'm very much, I agree that experiential learning is, learn by doing rather than learn by theory. And, I always reference back to swimming, because you can learn swimming in a textbook and learn by watching videos of other people swimming. But until you jump in the pool and try swimming, you'll never learn to swim. And so it's a little bit like that. The risks are you'll drown, but if you do it in a controlled environment with a lifeguard and a coach, then you'll be in shallow water where you can stand up and you're putting the guardrails in place to have a go, but you're doing it with all of the safety measures that you need to do it. And that's what this is a little bit of like, get about foundation level knowledge, understand enough to have the confidence to go, and with the people around you to put the guardrails on and go, yeah, just get on with it. And the worst thing you'll do is maybe swallow a bit of water or lose a bit of money on your first deal. But when you make the mistakes, when you buy your first property or you come across certain little mistakes or things, I didn't realize that, you learn then, don't you? And then once it's cost you money, you certainly won't forget to do that the next time. And that's how you then build your own criteria around deals and things. So
yeah, I agree. It's imperfect progress, isn't it? So rather than perfectly not starting, is the key to it for sure.
So in terms of building confidence, we talk about, what can we do? What are the little wins that we can, what are the little goals you mentioned? Obviously starting with the end in mind. Once you've got your goals and your plan, you then start going, well, if I'm going to buy buy-to-lets or if I'm going to buy X number of properties, what are the things you then start putting a bit of an action list? Okay, you just build backwards. Well, if you want to go and buy property, the first thing you need to do is view some properties. Therefore, you need to find some on Rightmove. Well, you've found some deals. The next thing you do is pick up the phone. And, the first time you phone, that might be, for some people, it might be daunting to pick up the phone with an estate agent. But when you've done that for the first time, you think, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then you view your first property, and then you go through the process, and then you make an offer. All of these little things are big wins. They're small items, but you tick those off and you stack them against each other. If you're thinking about going to auction, you could. It's a bit more difficult now because at auctions you used to be able to go to the auction and just watch, not bid or anything, but you can just watch and see how the auction works and see the dynamic and the people in the room and how they behave and things. There's lots that you can learn from that. So by going to all of these things, confidence will compound over time and it'll build into this fear of not doing anything, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here is the action piece, isn't it? Is actually doing something. So writing it down on paper, giving yourself a task list. I haven't met that many people that don't like putting lines through items on a task list. So create yourself a task list, make that first phone call. Look, you're highly likely to mess it up. I can remember one of the calls I made was a block of flats had been broken down into individual units. It looked as though it was an investor with a limited company. And I said to the agent, oh, look, I'm really interested in looking for portfolios or properties that are in limited companies and whatever. And whilst I was on the phone, I could physically see him roll in his eyes. I was like, oh, right, okay, here we go, here's another one. And never heard from him ever again. I was like, right, I probably won't take that tact ever again. I'll just keep it simple and just keep it really highbrow. Just get a view in, get in there and so on, rather than trying to get into the weeds of what your strategy is and all that sort of stuff. So I just learned, well, never going to do that again. Just get a view in, learn, understand, and that will come later down the line. So there's little bits like that, and don't be afraid. You are going to mess it up. You are not going to you are going to email an agent and not get a call back. Don't take it personally. It's just everybody's got to go through that pain barrier. You are going to, everybody says, oh, go take the agent out for a coffee and get to it. They haven't got time. It's not until you're 4 deals in with that person who's probably going to want to go for a coffee with you. So don't take it to heart that they're not going to give up the time because they don't know who you are and whether you're serious and so on off the back of it. So, yeah, these are things. But the main thing is that they're compounded actions that build into bigger things. And that, I think, for me, is the key element to it.
Yeah, agree. So I think the other thing that probably newer investors think about is that, yes, you've got experienced investors and developers and whatever. They stand on stage and they present and they're doing deals. Do they ever lose confidence? Do they have times where they worry about certain things? Or are they just stress-free, no worries? And
yeah, they wish. We wish. Yeah, look, I think it's the same, isn't it? If you do what you've always done in a day, then you probably do with your eyes shut. There's that whole thing about how fast time passes as you get older because you're not doing anything new anymore. And you've had that experience where you've got to work, you've driven from the house to work, and you can't remember how you got there because you've just done it on autopilot. So these guys are invariably as I said before, on the smaller projects, your single lets, are doing them on autopilot. They've been there, they've done it, been in the game long enough. You then put a housing development of 200 new build houses on a phased whatever, that's going to be X millions of pounds. I guarantee they're not walking into that confidently if they've never done it before. And that's why we talk about incremental, whenever we talk about finance, there are incremental increases in the complexity of the projects rather than single let through to building 200 houses. And that's true for anybody in any walk of life, whether you're in property or something else. If it's new to you, there's that graph, isn't there, which just shows the learning curve that comes with it. And the learning curve and the confidence curve as well. You're going to feel like you're out of depth to begin with, but that's the process. Again, we come back to the guardrails. You're not making foolish decisions. You're not jumping in 2 feet. You're going in with a bit of education, possibly a mentor, some guardrails along the way to help you get through that process. Then you can grow and take risks safely rather than trying to run before you can walk.
Yeah, and all investors really that are doing deals, everyone that's doing deals, when rates go up, they worry about, when the next refinance is coming up or whether the deal is still going to stack. If they've got a deal that's subject to planning, even if they're doing the deal subject to planning, they likely will have spent a number of thousands of pounds on the planning application itself. So that's a risk of losing money if the deal doesn't go ahead. Valuations, every day the valuation is booked in and there's a nervous wait before, the valuation is returned. Again, in different markets, that investor will have different confidence levels. That's what this talks about, on what that comes back at. So I think as you become a bit more seasoned and you probably just become a bit more tolerant to risk, you also become a bit more accustomed to it, and a bit resilient is probably the word I'm looking for, where you just kind of, is it good news? The interest rates are going up. And you just kind of shrug your shoulders and get on with it and just, right, okay, well, what's the plan? And then you work the plan and look at the numbers, and you have to be quite stoic about it because it is what it is. And you just, then you work on and plan around that accordingly. So yeah, it's what was the thing I saw the other day was, don't worry about it. You've solved every problem up until this point. Yeah. So it hasn't been the death of you yet. So just chill out and you'll find a way invariably. Yeah. And then, just to wrap this up, I think, from a confidence perspective, I think what you've talked about there, and it's just, all of the things that we've mentioned, get educated as best you can without not doing too much so then this analysis paralysis. Get out and speak to people who are doing deals right here, right now in this current market. Get or have mentors, speak to people. Obviously, you've got professional advisors then outside. So you've got mentors who are been there, done it, and they're investing. Then you've got your professional advisors, your valuers, your solicitors, your agents, your brokers. And then, your systems around what's your deal structure. That's the system. What's your investing system and your strategy? And then if you stick within that, you've built those guardrails up front, then you shouldn't really go too wrong. And then ultimately, you've just got to bite the bullet and get on with it.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think systems, processes, daily actions, and that'll take you a long way.
So I'll leave you with this line, this quote: confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite uncertainty. So there you go.
Mic drop.
Thanks, Mark. There was a great little episode on part 2 of the 3 C's of momentum investing. So we'll see you on the next episode.
Awesome. See you in a bit.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.